Hello everyone, welcome back to the class two. So in the class one, we went through why regenerative design matters. So I hope you all had the reflection, because I remember like Nick also told me that like you guys were required to go through the class within 1 week and also fill in the feedback. So I saw some of your feedback, and also similarly for the class two, we will reserve some space for the feedback as well. So which you may find the Google form together with this class. And for this class two, it's a continuation of like what we went through in class one. Why regenerative design matters. So previously we were looking at the pressing needs of the for the regenerative practice in design. So in the previous section, we also introduced the key values and like the roles of regenerative design in the global in the midst of like when global ecological um and societal challenges like is faced by most of the places. And in class two, we are going to go through ancestral wisdom. Why is it important, and also how is serving as a foundation of like how most of the building culture in different area. So we will look into the legacy of the ancestral wisdom from different region and how they influence the regenerative design. So I hope you enjoy the class. So without further ado, so this is what we went through in the previous week, which is class one. So we went through intersecting classes of our time and also how we build in relation to achieving 2030 net zero goal. And we also went through some of the failed example of like when we were too much focusing on like, how do we enabling modernism in different country. And in fact, like a lot of time is also linked to the short-termism enabled like collectively by the developers and very market-centric mindset. And in of course, there are some examples that define that short-termism in the market society as well. And so we went through the differences of like when it comes to some of these projects that carry long-term value, how is carry a different outcome and processes towards those projects that like fail to deliver the good outcome and also the good reality because of like the short-termism. So we also went through a timeline in terms of like how we used to be the land listener and how did we turn into the market fulfiller. So through that, we review the role of architect and also the architect education, and also some of my personal practice in Borneo Lab as well. So this week, actually, we are going through a few things. So we will start from looking at the narrative of soil, which is also the project that we did previously, and why the soil matters. And I also want to go through like how could like land development, architecture, and landscape design serving as a choreography or care. So human touch is not necessarily a scar all the time. It can also heal. It can be also a healing gesture systemically. So we are also will look into the relationship of human and nature and culture and landscape relationship. And there is also a question I want to pose here about longevity. We build like as if things are forever, but how long does a building really last? Yeah. And at the same time, we are also going to go through like some imaginative like work from the like or the outcome of the imagination on how to heal. And yeah, and also some of the past example case study. So hopefully that will inspire you further. Okay. So narrative of soil was actually a project we were looking at during the pandemic. So it was also a project that like has been ongoing, a project that I've been developing with my my research partner Eliza Colleen from UK. So it started because she came from the fashion background and I came from the architecture background. So we were interested in soil as a material. How does it influence like in terms of the material culture, in terms of like how is bring in different narrative from different regions. So with this project, apart from ourselves like looking at the narrative of soil from the architect and fashion designer perspective, we also bring in like 8 different soil practitioners around the world to look into like the context of soil. So it's ended out like there were attempts like during the pandemic, we were setting out online workshop and online study and research on like how the soil being baked into furniture, for example, and how can you use soil as a fundamental material for 3D printer for construction. How do you use polluted soil and turn it into political ceramic that can bring in provocative message to the exhibition? And how do you harvest energy from soil? So soil is also organic. It's also contain a lot of organic matters as well. And so in the which is soil Ross was using soil as a fundamental material for harvesting energy. So this was the theme when we were looking at the soil, because soil is such a universal material that can be found in different areas. So through soil, we link out the global community and global like connection to enable the story to be told from different soil perspective. So here is a small video of soil.
那在世界各地呢，甚至包括台湾的原住民，那他们的神话里面都有提到，我们人的身体呢所组成的这个元素里面，除了来自于水跟空气以外，其他都是来自于土。
Soil is like one of the basics materials we have on Earth. The interest that I have as a designer, triggering other to think about their experiences with soil.
My projects all seem to gravitate without intention towards mud. The majority of my practice sort of is looking at the intersection between like design and design technology and nature, create more symbiotic relationships between the two.
Research on narrative of soil actually lasted for 2 years, and we also garnered a lot of support from British Council, and so through the connection through culture like funding and grant, so we were looking at like the soil narrative in the aspect of like exhibition and research and propagation as well. So we publish a propagation like together with it, and since then, like in my own practice, I was also looking at soil. How could soil be used as the material for architecture, for the structure, for buildings? For me and for Eliza, this the conversation about soil is still ongoing. So we were also interested in looking at like the soil from different region, and the kind of the meanings and the story and tells alongside that. So I still remember in the early days, like when we starting this project, a lot of people around us were asking like why the soil matters, because for them, soil is just a dirt. It's basically something seems to be very humble, or perhaps like easily to be can be easily neglected. So this is also something that we find that is important to bring forward this question about like why such a universal material and such an important material. When you look at like the composition of soil, it's actually contain not simply the organic matter, not simply the sand, but also clay, water, and like numbers of like rocks and stones. So it's a composition of like from the liquid material to the solid material, solid matters. With such diversity within soil, there's so much potential for it to tell so much story, but at the same time, it has been disregarded most of the time. Yeah, so this is also why I want to use like narrative or story to open out this chapter today, because I would like to start from talking about soil. So when you look at the soil at the moment in the world, uh, because of the intensive farming practice around the world. So we have degraded soil. So degraded soil actually means that it's low in the organic matters, like the lively matters, which also means that it doesn't really retain a lot of water as effectively, and making us vulnerable to the climate shock, such as drought, wildfire, and water shortage. So 52% of our soil is already degraded around the world. So this is basically like the data we got from the earth.org. So it's a glimpse look toward the future, and also a projection suggesting that degradation level could rise to 90% by 2050 if we do not act immediately. So as you can see, this is the data, the diagram around the worldwide, like how much of the percentage of the degradation, the soil, the degraded soil happen in different region. Yeah, so in 2019, like as you can see, most of the places has reached to at least 40% or 60% of the degradation, especially like for those one who has been like for example in the places we're familiar in Asia, like most of the places actually experience 40%, 20%, or 60% degradation because of the intensive farming. So in 2050, these will increase to 95%. So what does it mean? It's like 5% of our land area not degraded. So this is a new map from Safe Soil Movement, illustrating like how shocking percentage of the global soil degradation predicted by 2050. So we get this data from SafeSoil.org, which is also a soil survey and research website that I will urge you to follow up, because I think soil is actually such a fundamental element like to the earth, but yet a lot of time we overlook like the serious issue that relevant to the soil. So and we spoke about intensive farming, like how agriculture can harm soil. But I think I also want to give you some time to reflect. Is human intervention always leading to bad consequences? So I think there's an assumption that like a lot of time when humans step into a plot of land, impact already started. So in this way, I also want you to think about like look back into the history, and thinking about like in the past whether the human intervention is always bad. Actually, so then we will open up this new section, like the human touch in fact is not always the scar. It can be also healing gesture systemically. So this is showing you the first example that human intervention is not necessarily always lead to the best consequence. So there is a type of soil in Amazonian area called like Terra Petra de Indio. So Terra Petra is actually the type of soil that like through a human intervention, like over thousands of years, like how could like through also the farming practice, soil becoming richer. Yeah, so it's a dark earth of the Indians. So what they did in the past is also like linking it with the composition of like the biocharcoal together with like a process, a ritualistic process or psychedelic process that enable soil to go through the Sweden practice. And then giving back to the landscape for like the low plants and then gradually harvested and clearing the plot for bigger plants. So through that kind of psychedelic like rotation, soil actually becoming much richer. And if you look at like so this is the picture of the terra petra in comparison to the normal soil. So when you look at like the 2 meters of like the terra petra is actually like very condensed with a lot of organic matters. And when it comes to the normal soils that went through the intensive farming, you can tell the difference in the color. So there were also like scientists were looking at like the compost in terms of like using the terra petra like as the compost together with the biochar, like what does it means in terms of like the harvest and what does it means in terms of the nutrient within it. So if you wish to learn more about this anthropogenic charcoal amended soil, you can also look into the data reference from here as well. So another example is Milpa system. Milpa system is also an example that could be found from Mayan forest, from which is also from the Amazonian region as well. So there is a four-stage like agriculture process, which is similar. I think the entire idea about like how soil transition can be cited through a like can be better through a cyclic and like rotation. It's also applied here as well. It's a four-stage agricultural process. So for the first stage, like forests are basically planted with tree sister. Tree sister actually mean squash, nut, and corn. So basically it's the kind of like the plants like smaller plants, and then after the next like 4 years the three sister will be planted together with the fruit trees. So those fruit tree could be banana trees or guava trees that is a bit like taller than the three sister. And then the next when it's entered the next cycle, which is the third stage, forest garden are planted with slow yielding fruit trees to create food forests, and together with some trees that like can be used for timber. And then in when it's entering the stage 4, like the cord forest grow into the hardwood forest, and then milpa cycle begin again like with its burning. But it can also continue to keep as the timber forest before it's entered the burning cycle. Yeah, so once you started that burning cycle, then you have to kickstart again, like to go back into stage 1. So with this milpa system, so there's also like they also shape out like in terms of the plan, the way that is fixed in terms of like the geolocation is like it could be like distinct, it can be differentiated by like the crop forest, garden forest, and hardwood forest. And then there are places for fixed location for residents. So I hope you remember this diagram, because later on when we speak about permaculture, you may find there are some like similarity in terms of like the strategy of like setting out this milpa system, milpa cycle, and how and its relation to later on like the organic farming. Okay, so here's a little video.
Of the world's ancient civilizations, the Maya stand out as one of the most impressive and mysterious. By the year 1000 AD, most of the Mayan city centers in the Yucatan were being neglected. Left behind were huge pyramids, intricate works of art, and a complex written language. Oddly, these great achievements were soon forgotten by the Maya themselves. But why were the cities abandoned in the first place? Maya farmer Alfonso Azul explains that Even the Maya today don't know the answer.
Well, one of the things that I realized is that when we were going to school, they used to tell us that the Mayas used to live in this country and then they disappeared. Nobody know what happened to them. So we were not able to connect ourselves with the present civilizations that are visible with the various ancient monuments that are left in Belize. So one day I met a fellow from the US, I think, and he was looking at the ancient monuments in my farm. And he said, wow, what a wonderful work. He said, I wonder where those Mayas went to. I said, they didn't go anywhere. What do you mean? No, they didn't go anywhere. Where they are? So I told him, you are talking to one of them. We were not taught about the history of our people. It was in my adult age that I managed to read all these things about the Mayas, and I'm able to connect them with myself.
Many have claimed that the ancient Maya degraded their land, resulting in an environmental collapse. This is not likely, says archaeologist Annabelle Ford, who in 1983 found the ancient city of El Pilar in western Belize. In the vicinity of the crumbled city, Dr. Ford and her team discovered that 90% of the trees were species that were useful to the Maya in some way. 20 species were particularly dominant.
We were able to come up with these 20 dominant plants that were all useful, all important for construction, for medicine, for thatching, for production, for fruit, for gum, even for the birds, even for the animals, are counted among important uses that the Maya have. As we started considering the nature and identifying the trees, we realized that this was a forest garden, and in fact, the Maya were gardening the forest. Now we're looking at the relic. It's a legacy of probably 8 millennia of selection and certainly 4 millennia of fairly intense use.
And so the Maya and their ancestors were being selective in their use of plants during thousands of years of trial and error. Another breakthrough came when Dr. Ford saw how contemporary Maya farmers near El Pilar were growing their crops. It was not in the Western style of large fields of single items like corn or beans, but rather in small mixed crop plots called milpas. Furthermore, the Maya were using a sophisticated and sustainable cycle of planting that left most of their land in forest. Here's how the cycle works. In preparation for planting, the milpa farmer cuts and burns a piece of his forest. Fire is a necessary part of the cycle that returns microelements to the soil in the form of charcoal. Next, the farmer plants corn seeds among the tree stumps. And among the corn plants, he sows beans, squash, and as many as 90 other kinds of annual crop plants. He does this for about 4 years, and no plow touches his soil. Master farmer Narciso Torres uses only a sharp pole, and because Narciso's soil is not plowed, it never washes away when it rains. Furthermore, the milpa farmer uses no chemical fertilizers, pesticides, or herbicides. Nearby, streams run clear and unpolluted. To the untrained eye, the milpa doesn't look clean and organized in the way of Western monoculture.
But in fact, it's retaining water, building fertility, biodiversity of the soil. It has the worms and the charcoal. All of those things are right in there, and they're kept there. They're not moving around. Alfonso Sewell says very, very poignantly to me when I was talking one time, I've never seen a milpa where there's erosion, and I've never seen a plowed field that doesn't.
Victor Chambor, a Lacandon Maya farmer from the Mexican state of Chiapas, also has vast knowledge refined through the countless generations of his ancestors. He is particularly proud of a large stretch of rainforest near his milpa. He knows every plant in the forest and what things he can use there. 4 years into the milpa cycle, seeds drifting in from the surrounding forest have sprouted into young trees in Narciso's milpa. He keeps the ones that are useful to him and eliminates the others. Narciso continues to sow his annual crop plants for another 4 years. By then, the young forest trees are beginning to cast too much shade for corn or beans, so he initiates the cycle elsewhere by burning another plot of forest. The new forest, with its many products, will be as important to Narciso as his milpa. It will grow and mature for the final 12 years of the cycle and will become a place for abundant wildlife.
There's this image of slash and burn being really destructive, and the image that comes from our European position that to get more product, you have to clear more land, and that means all land is cleared. The MILPA system is a cycle. At any one time, you'll have a minimum of two-thirds of the land in forest.
And that is a critical point. Dr. Ford has concluded that if the Maya used the highly sustainable MILPA cycle in ancient times, it's not likely that they deforested the land and degraded their environment. Instead, we need to look at other social, economic, and political causes for the collapse of great cities. The Maya farmers lived on, and with neither pyramids to build or kings to support, they continued to perfect this high-yield MILPA cycle through hundreds of generations of hard work and accumulated knowledge. The MILPA cycle may be their most important achievement and their greatest gift to the future of mankind. But in this modern era where agriculture is increasingly mechanized, will this tremendous knowledge be lost?
There are fewer and fewer of these master forest gardeners, like Victor, like Narciso, like Alfonso. These people carry a knowledge that is a 8,000-year experimental practice. Can you imagine? And to not include them in a sustainable future when they can really step up and help, and they're ready to help. We need them. And if these people are not here for us, we can never find out that the kinds of things they know that have been this long experiment. The sustainability of the Maya Forest Garden is unparalleled.
Mm. Yeah, so if you wish to see more on this, like I actually would encourage you to look into more information on the Mayan forest. There's a lot of like it's quite extensive amount of like knowledge on the ancient forest, and it's also remind me of the trip I went to Mexico last year. So we visited. We were working quite closely with the farmers from the Xochimilco area, which is like one of the places being regarded as the food basket of Mexico. So it was around like 12% of the biodiversity of the country was contained in the Xochimilco River, but because it was at the same time being positioned as the food basket, so there's a lot of like demands on Xochimilco as a producer, as a production area. But despite so, like when you speak to the farmers, like when we were speaking to the farmers there, like it seems to be like they interested in the topics of like how do we keep the seed sovereignty. Like for example, like a lot of time when you see when it comes to the seeds, like the seedlings, like you get it from the in most of the country you is issued by the governments or is being monopolized by certain organization, which ended out like the farmers need to buy a seedling from the local authority, which also bring in the questions of like the engineer diversity and or it is a fair diversity or is a diversity that like comes organically, which is good for the land. And the other things that like I found out from the region is how much of the ancestral wisdom they kept in their area. Like for example, they still practice like waffle gardens. Like so, if you're interested in knowing more about this, like later on we will also introduce a publication on low tech, which will speak about like about it. But I don't think this time round is part of this. yet. Yeah, yeah, the book recommendation, Low Tech, designed by Radical Indigenism by Julia Watson. So this publication, like a few years back, like when it was released, there was also a lot of conversation about like the low tech, like during the heydays of modernism, we speak about like high tech building. But nowadays, like there's also a lot of focus on the low tech, like how could we be more low tech and high intelligence rather than like high tech and low intelligence. So I think this book is a fascinating book, like bring in different perspective on different landscape, geographical landscape, like how did people build their building with a lot of wisdom. So there's a tech talk. I'm just going to like take parts of it from Julia Watson. So if you're interested in seeing the entire thing, you can go and watch it because it was recorded during the pandemic days. So I felt that like the entire things was very well like edited because of like she didn't really need to go through the anxiety on the stage. Yeah. Fragment of the books, because if you look at like the publication, I actually will urge you. I hope there is a copy in the library, so which you can flip through the publication, because it's not simply speak about like the example shared earlier. It's also go through like from different landscape, like mountain, forest, desert, and wetland. How did people inherited the ancestral wisdom from the past and keep building like building the structure or carry out development through all this wisdom. Yeah. So I think like then when you look at like from obviously from different geographical landscape and feature, it seems to be there's a like presence of land listener from everywhere. But then how did we come from so I think there is a mistake over here. It should be from land listener to the market fulfiller. So oh yeah, so but I think over here, like how could we change our position from the market fulfiller to the land listener? Yeah, so the land listener design practice like grow from immersion in the biocultural landscape, like how could we learn from the people and the plants and the ecology rhythm, myth, water, and wind. And then seasonal time, as you can see, like during different season, is like monsoon will have different implication, the flood implication to the landscape. And during the dry season, how do we cope with it? To design like certain structure, perhaps to capture water, or to how do we enable the landscape to breathe with all this cycle? And ancestral conversation, like sensing the continuity of this wisdom through ritual, tool making, and forms that is already carried by the land. So, and I think these also bring in the another subject of like placelessness, because a lot of time as a market fulfiller, as an architect, that traveling around, working in different landscape, all the things that we do, like as you can see from the plan of work, it's like you don't really have time to spend on particular site or particular landscape. So there is also a notion of placelessness, and how do we move from that to the deep place sensing? So I think now has come to another time to reflect. How does human learning and how to collaborate with the nature over time, and how shall we study a site? So wherever we learn about like site survey, site studying, like how is it going to be relevant to the landscape nature? And this time I also want to bring in some of our finding from the human nature research as well, like especially on the culture and landscape relationship. So this is actually a diagram I did like for a research like called human nature. So over here is concluded from Julian Stewart, like cultural ecology. So nature itself is like carry different type of landscape, and at the same time because of the over time like human practice on top of all this landscape is creating this kind of like culture of cultivation, extraction, or contribution. Like, for example, certain ritual to commemorate or to honor the landscape. So like is between, like, so human from the landscape also started to develop certain culture, and because of all this the culture of like custom, ritual, certain tradition, certain ritual, and certain like symbolic act, like, so it created this kind of like very interesting interrelationship that will set cultural narrative, which could be the myth, could be the historical account, and then because of these interrelationship, like, it's also create a feedback loop that will constantly changing the landscape, and like human also go through like cycle of adaptation and changes, and they will also grow resilience and grow the practice of sustainability. So this is actually something that like I summarize from what Julian Stewart observation on the Latin America landscape. Yeah, so what it does, like over the there's 5 elements over this landscape and culture interplay model, like landscape and environment. So like, for example, the natural feature, geographical and ecological characteristic, they are quite important, so quite significant to defining what the landscape is about, and also the resource availability as well, the type and the distribution of the natural resources, and human practice wise, like you'll be able to see, like, you know, in terms of the cultivation, it's actually a good tool to understand like the structure or the skeletons of like the human and culture, human culture, and the nature and the landscape. Yeah, so extraction. So over here you will see extraction practice as well, and contribution, and cultural narrative. Like, it could be also a story and legend explaining why the landscape feature, and why, how does it form the human practices as well. And then the custom and ritual, like, so certain cultural practice like related to the landscape, ceremony, and then practice that reinforce the cultural connection to the land. Yeah, so an interrelationship, like long-standing like cultural practice related to the landscape. Yeah. So over here, like, of course, I'm not going to go through like every bit about the research. Like, so one of the research is like, I thought is important to point out is like the checklist for assessing the impact when any project comes into the landscape. Yeah, so the way we were looking at things are like, you know, there are some short-term project, mid-term project, or legacy project. Like, so the short-term project actually lasted for 1 to 3 years, and then the mid-term project lasted for longer, 3 to 10 years, and the legacy work kind of like seeing position itself as a long-term sustainability project or community-led like project. Yeah, so the parts that like I thought will be quite relevant to this class this time around is the exit plan, is the exit strategy, and the long-term impact. A lot of time when we're doing a project, when we were working on the project, we never thought about like exit plan. We never thought about, like, you know, what could be happening, like, let's say 10 years later or 20 years later, because and or even 100 years later, because I think not simply is already beyond the project time scale, and a lot of time is also beyond like our commitment to the space, to the place. And so for like over here, so for the short terms, like, how could you provide immediate and tangible benefit and have a clear exit plan? Do not leave anything behind the expectation or unfinished commitment, because it's like by doing so, you basically bring in the commitment you unable to fulfill. So when it comes to the midterm project, like, how do you transfer skill and knowledge to the local participants, and how do you ensure the project can continue without the external dependency? So the moment you left the space, you left the site, will certain momentum still continue like when the project is already there? So when it comes to the legacy work, how do you fully embed the project within the local governance, funding, and education system? Like, will the community like be part of this governance, or it will still relying on your oversight for the project? So how do you ensure the community has full ownership and control over the future development? So these are actually the things that I want to bring out about the long-term impact, because these will also link to what we are going to speak about. So you see, I think like now it's also another time to reflect. Like we build as if it is forever, and a lot of time we even for architect our favorite timeline is built to last. But seriously, in reality, how long does a building really last? Seed Pavilion, for example, Thomas Heatherwick award-winning UK Pavilion for Expo 2010 Shanghai. So it will not be reviewed, like when will not be reviewed once it is dismantled, despite a host of interest buyers. So if you're looking at this project, like during when it was built, it's created a lot of media attention and quite a lot of like writing about feature about this pavilion. But after the expo is over, like dismantling started, and then basically creating it is created like such a large amounts of wastage like to the area as well. And then the other project, famous project like Nakinga Capsule Tower. So if you know of this, like Master from Metabolism Kishore Kurokawa. So it was completed in 1972 and it was dismantled in 2022. So it was a rare built example of metabolist architecture intended to evolve by replacing the modular pod. But in practice, like because most of this modular, like some of it is like you wouldn't be able to find a supplier anymore, because they also like phase out from the market. So it's gone bad like so rapidly, and then it was finally demolished. So if you look at the site now, it's no longer there. So another project by like Master Allison and Peter Smithson. So this building, this development was also built completed in 1972. So when it was built, it was designated to be a brutalist housing estate, and also it carried a bold like architectural statement. But because of a decades of neglect, so eventually it was replaced by a generation scheme. So when you look at the entire, so it was quite a big area that like being demolished, like so another famous example, Buckminster Fuller, like geodesic dome. So it was a structural like statement that like how can we build more efficiently, how could we build like with minimal elements, but then like compose a very strong structure for housing or for like structure. So these are actually the sketches like from Buckminster Fuller, which is a like engineer genius. So which describe, but then like the reality, in the reality, this is actually a project in Germany, like a lot of like geodesic home dome eventually becoming product that can be brought to like to the market to resolve some of the instant housing solution. So people bought it, but then eventually there is also discarded, like so there was a lot of discarded like dome around the area, and also came a very serious like issue. So these are like some of the picture that you can find online, like how the dome was being discarded like in different places, despite it came from the master sketches. Like so we build as if it is forever, but really how long does a building really last? Like so for commercial building is like according to the average like assumption, it's like 30 to 50 years. For the residential building, it's like 50 to 70 years. For the infrastructure nowadays, like bridges and dam, big structure, 50 to 100 years. And then for the temporary shelter, is often outlive the permanent one in function. Yeah, so what we speak about here is actually like for example the refugee camp. Yeah, so so there is also another architect that I wish to bring attention to you, Nader Khalili. So one of the famous question that he he poses like during his time was like how what is the average of like what is the average years you think like the refugee live in the refugee camp? So among his audience, a lot of people answer like perhaps it's like 3 years, 1 year, or a few months. But then the realities was like by average is 27 years. People living in the refugee camp. So and the way the assumption of it is temporarily made a lot of architects actually design refugee camp like in a as a temporary solution. So it doesn't really a lot of time all these like very transitional space or like with the temporary material, temporary structure, giving a lifestyle, a livelihood that is like not dignified, and also creating, in turn, creating a lot of problem to the residents or the refugee. Yeah. So, and most building are actually demolished not due to the failure, but market turnover, zoning changes, or shift in aesthetic and utility value. So yeah, building doesn't really last for a long time. So the way we design and the way we're looking at development, there is a necessity to change. And at the same time, I also want to bring in like another set of like conversation on how do we imagine like the how ancestral wisdom can come and help us to imagine like what building can means. And one of my favorite quote is like the true measure of intelligence is not knowledge but imagination. So this came from the Greek philosopher Aspasia. Yeah. So imagine building as a material bank. So here I'm going to bring in some example of like how people were doing it. Like for example, this structure, urchin uh, urchin pavilion, like it's from the Koda like studio. So it was building a pavilion, like so people were obsessed about like building pavilion in for festival, for different setting. But because it's for a lot of time this festival is destined for temporary use, but then how do you build it in a way that like it will be friendly, environmentally friendly to the society. So for example, like this urchin pavilion was built with like 100 chair. So if you look at the way it was built, it can like the entire thing can be recycled and turned into something else. Yeah. So after it's being built, like the chair is still the chair. Yeah. So these are the structure, and then the other project is like petals. Yeah, like so this is the structure that like was carried out in Copenhagen for also a festival. So how do you build a pavilion with foldable chair? Yeah. And then it's a beautiful project like in the courtyard, and that the chair can open out, can be used for as a furniture as well. Yeah. And then this project is quite fascinating because People Pavilion actually have accomplished this with a radical new approach. Like all of the material for this 250 square meter are actually borrowed. So not only the material from the traditional supplier and producer, but also from the because the location of this is Eindhoven resident themselves. So the People Pavilion actually show like how they borrow the items, including the TV and also the furniture, the structure, So most of the items from building this pavilion, this big pavilion, almost equivalent to a building, was actually borrowed. So it's also show the process and also the outcome of this actually show a new future for sustainable building architecture, like a powerful design language, which with the new collaboration and the intelligent construction methods. So I think along while designing this, like they spend a lot of time like designing the building in a way that like most of the structure and components, they can be done in a way that like after when it was dismantled, it can go back into the system. It can be used for or upcycle for something else. Yeah. So these another interesting bits about this is like if you look at like despite it was built for a temporary structure, but it doesn't really compromise. It's like tempering, like the building tempering strategy. Like if you look at the building, like it still carry out like the drainage system as as requested for the normal building. So the performance wasn't really compromised like by looking at the drainage system, gutter system, and the structural system. So like if you look at the structure of this, it also seems like there's a lot of like black strap. In fact, all of these were used in order to type out the structure, type out different timber, but most of them were actually locked into place by strapping through the strapping system. So the architect of this project also spent a lot of time, and Arab, which is the engineer of this project, were looking at like ways and measure to put together the structure, and then after that it can be used for something else. So it's quite interesting to look into like how tree timber like stripe can be put together and at the same time lock into place without damaging the material. And over here you can see different type of chair and furniture and TV, because they are all borrow from the local resident. Yeah. So the entire strategy of this is like there was a lot of like use at the bottom of this is like there are reinforced concrete as a foundation pile, and on top of it is like is married with a wooden beam, and then the facade elements and the recycled plastic cladding. Plastic cladding is also something quite interesting, because the plastic was actually upcycled from the plastic and turned into tile. And then the entire ways of like putting it into facade is actually through staggering and hanging. So that everything can be was borrowed for 9 days, and it will be returned to the owner after the festival. So all the material will remain unharmed. So you need to design the strategy in a way that like to keep it unharmed. So there are no screw or glue nor drill or saw on the construction site. So basically it seems to be a very quiet site. And to make this happen, the architect actually invented the whole new construction method. All material was strapped together. So imagine like the kind of challenge that that as architect you're not necessarily fixing everything together through through making them permanent, but like to keep their keep them temporarily like in place, and then it can be upcycle or recycle afterward. So look at this drawing. This is like despite it is a temporary building, but then there is still consideration, still measure of keeping the water away from the keep it waterproof for the building, and also the facade system as well. So despite it's a temporary building, but there's least compromise over the performance of the building. So it's a fascinating project. Like I think there's also a lot to learn from this project as well. Yeah, so this drawing is also showing like how things can be put together because of the material was done in a modular way. So most of these material they can be upcycled after this. Yeah, so as you can see, it's probably is a bit messy, like in terms of like the look, but the the intention behind it is actually quite noble. The fact that when you think about like everything you build is actually like can be upcycled and can be used for something else, and it will be kept unharmed because for this festival it was a temporarily it was serving for a temporary purpose anyway. And why wasting material? Why wasting so much material? Just like the project we saw earlier, like by so many different famous architects. Like why wasting material for serving a temporary purpose that creating so much wastage? So for the cladding, like over here, it speak about like how they produce from the plastic waste from Ihon Vernaren, like which is like sorted by type and color. So all these shingle, they are actually important step in the development of their pretty plastic like cladding material. In fact, a few years back, we were also looking at the plastic, like using the plastic towel harvested from the ocean and then turning them into towel, and then eventually after the festival it can be returned to the community. So during that time we identify Epic Home based in Malaysia as the one we can donate to. So then they can keep the shingles, the plastic towel for furniture development. So I think all these process are very interesting process to navigate. But at the same time, I think it's also important to mention, in fact, it was not new to build without screw, glue, drill, or saw. So I want to bring attention to one example. So if you look at this drawing, 清明上河图. So it's a drawings that was done in 12th century. So it's a painting of along the river during the Qingming festival by Zhang Zhiduan. So with these drawings, as you can see, there was a wooden arch bridge. So the way it was done, it was actually through so this is a drawings of the timber arch like bridge study over the southeast region of China, and represented like so there was a very extensive like research by the researcher Liu Yan, so which I also put the link here. I hope you have a chance, you can have a look. So the data, like what he did was he was researching across like the timber arch bridges around China, and then documenting how they were built without. So it's quite fascinating because if you look at the structure in the past, people already knew how to build a bridge without any nail, without any extra tools. So the way that it was done is actually quite mathematical, and like the yeah. So this is actually describing the process of how the wooden bridge can be done. Yeah. And so without like so it's an incremental process of like how people can build it. But of course, like building this, it also means that it has to be a collective process to live out the structure. Yeah. So this is also a beautiful like structure that like a model that done by the team to demonstrate how the structure can be built without a single nail. So more to be imagined. So you see, we spoke about like structure. We spoke about like structure that like being done, being constructed with the ancestral wisdom. And now I also want to spend some time to review like some of the things that we spoke earlier in the chapter one. So we spoke about like, we now like, let's say, evolving into the role of land listener. So what does it means like when it comes to the plan of work? Before building, during construction, during use, and at the end of use. So before the building, like I think there's one thing that quite fundamental. We should really look into the purpose and the context. So what are the role does this building play in the ecological and social system is enter? What it meant is like, as you can see, some of the project we spoke about, like, every time when you put any object or items or building, like in fact, you are already creating the impact. Like for example, the structure, the structure we spoke about, like during the festival, by placing it there, like how it's already impacting the society, the social system. But then like if you interact with the social system by introducing an act of borrowing things from the community, it changed the dynamic. It changed the dynamic of that social system that like is enter. And is the new structure really needed, or it can be an existing one to be adapted? For example, like the project we show, like were introduced like by Julia Watson. So do you really need to build a structure, or perhaps like the existing trees can also play a part, or the existing like material can be used? And also, how does it respond to the local climate, the material, and the community knowledge? Like while building things, are you also instilling knowledge to the community, or perhaps you are just, setting out a new condition to the community to navigate from the beginning? So how does it like respond to the local climate will be quite fundamental as well. As you can see, some of the example being introduced were like how there are high adaptability to the climate. So, and also what kind of cycle, like we talk about, like in terms of the seasonal, social, and ecological, the building is embedded in. And that's quite important because a lot of time, like now we when we speak about like most of the high-tech building, most of the high-tech building is just like to keep the comfort rather than to keep the comfort of the inhabitant. But does it really keep the comfort of the global climate? Not necessarily. So does it really interact with the surrounding context or the surrounding season or the ecological system? Not necessarily. So I think it's important for us as architect, like start answering this question about like how do we like set out a system that's in harmony with the cycle. Okay, during construction, I really hope that like you guys can also start thinking about the process and the material, because it's like, where do the material come from? Are they renewable? Are they reused? Or perhaps they are local? So as some of the project that like we can see from the introduction today, or even from Julia Watson, like most of those material were actually like from locally, and they are renewable, and because they are fiber material, they will be degradable to the land, so it doesn't really create any harm to the land. And the construction methods empower local labors and knowledge system. So the fascinating parts about low tech, the book, is does introduce a lot of like technique that will require a lot of community effort to build bridges, to build structure, to build infrastructure. And because of that, is keep the community knowledge as a ritualistic like cycle that the elderly will pass down their knowledge to the young one. So and how do we enable that in the nowadays like context, especially like in the context that like most of the places are facing the urgency of the climatic issue. So how do you build with the knowledge that like will help the structure to be more harmonized with its landscape, but at the same time passing down those knowledge to the young one? And also how much energy and waste is generated during the building, and how can we minimize, how can these things be minimized and be integrated? So which like I think the last project demonstrated that. And during use, like we should also review the performance and reciprocity as well. does the building give more than its take? Like, for example, does it harvest rainwater, produce any energy, or nourishing soil, or provide habitat? So, like, as you can see, some of these example like showing that, you know, especially the last one, I think the interesting things is that because it's only lasted for 9 days, and in the area it's not necessarily is a is in the rainy season, but then it's still like have the gutter consider like how does it harvest rain, and how does it like and some of the project we will introduce later will also show like how could building and development be the produce energy as well. And I think like one of the example Valban, like which we introduced in chapter 1, also spoke about like how, you know, that development itself actually you can harvest energy more than you consume energy from the development. And how does it support the health and culture and the well-being of the user and surrounding? Yeah, so I think the other thing is can it adapt to changing need without without needing to be demolished? So I think it also bring the like the focus to one of the project we saw. Like you see with a lot of project that we saw, like for example metabolism or during the modernism days, like nowadays they disappear from the landscape. So but like it would be interesting to also figure out like can we change the needs of the spaces, because the spaces, let's say if the framework is still structurally fine, like why do we demolish them like without thinking about like perhaps changing its needs or the function? So at the end of the use, can we look into the disassembly or the legacy? So can the building or part of it be deconstructed or reused or biodegradable? So I think this is actually a question that like I find some of the institute had been like working in interdiscipline manner with other disciplines, like to look into like biodegradability of the architecture. Like for example, there is also a discussion of like how mushroom can be used, like mycelium can be used as the building material, or soil being used as a material fiber, and what is left behind: material, knowledge bank, relationship. And and a lot of time, like in the third chapter, I will show you an example. It's a fascinating example in India, like how does the building actually help to strengthen, help to reinforce that relationship among the workers, like um yeah, so I think I'm not going to spoil it, like, but I'm excited to show you the example. And does it regenerate the site ecologically, socially, and culturally after its end use? So these are all valid questions to think about. And also, does it help to train future stewards and land listener in its design, use, or transformation? Does it help to inspire a new generation of future stewards? So these are the things that like I really hope that like it can help you to reframe your way of thinking, your way of like setting out the design process, architectural process. So of course there are some cross-cutting theme as well. Is it designed as part of the larger regenerative system, like for example the community food web, water cycle, migration path? Actually there will be more mention of this like in the third chapter. So I think like how could building, like nowadays when we speak about regenerative design practice, a lot of time it was inspired by regenerative farming and regenerative like agriculture, because there is an urgency to look into soil. So I also find that like it's important for the third chapter to start from like reviewing the history of like the transition of regenerative architecture or practice in relation to the crisis that it was facing during the time. And the other thing is like, how does the building engage time, lunar cycle, seasonal cycle, and generational one as well, rather than like just looking at the linear deadline. And also what emotional, spiritual, and cultural value does it carry? And how is it passed on and transformed? So I really hope that like all these questions, it will help you to reframe your thinking. And at the same time, like yeah, so I will also put like some question over similarly like last time to the Google form. So, but I think there is also a bigger question that like I want you to think about, like what else would you like to imagine with the ancestral wisdom? So thank you for today. So this is the end of our lecture for the class 2. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy the class.